Hey, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is a handwoven experience, episode 44. And in this episode, we're going to talk about shrinkage. See, any weaver that's ever put a project through the washer, maybe in the dryer too, has had to deal with shrinkage. And what you find is that while it should be an exact science, there's really this mystical unknown element to it that keeps you guessing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is my favorite yarn. This is a 100% cotton carpet warp. And let's say that if you were to just take this whole thing, put it in the washer and dryer, it would shrink 10%. Like the fiber by itself, all alone, would shrink 10%, just hypothetically. By the way, don't ever do that. Don't put a whole tube or cone of yarn in the washer and dryer. That's not a good idea. So 10% on its own, right? So logically you think if I use this in the warp and the weft of a project, I can plan for 10% shrinkage, correct? Wrong. It doesn't work that way. Logically, in your head, you think that should be easy. It's not quite that simple. Let me show you a couple examples. So this is a project that I just finished. This is a twill. It's a 2-2 twill, which means that the warp went over 2 and the weft went over 2. So it's a balanced weave. And when I washed and dried this, it shrunk 11% in both directions. The warp shrunk 11% and the weft shrunk 11%, which, by the way, is pretty rare for me. But it's a balanced fabric, right? You see as much warp as you do weft. So let's compare it to this guy. This is rep weave. And rep weave is a warp faced pattern, which means the whole point is to see the warp yarns. All these pretty colors that you see, these are all warp yarns. The weft yarns are just kind of filler. You can see those at the sides there. But I used all cotton for this project, all the same fiber. And what I found is that the warp shrunk 14% and the weft, this direction, the width of it, shrunk 4%. Drastically different. So what makes the difference, you ask? Well, in this type of pattern, each warp yarn, we see a lot of them, right? They're floating above the weft yarns. They have a lot of room. So when it goes through the washer, and in my case, the dryer too, the agitation, the water, the heat, all of that gives it more space to shrink. And by God, shrink it's gonna do. In contrast, the weft yarns, which are the ones that are kind of hidden, that make the ridges in the pattern, those are really tightly packed in there. They don't have a lot of room. So those only shrunk 4% versus these that all shrunk 14%. What a difference, right? But it is fascinating to think that this fabric and this fabric was all made with the same yarn. Very crazy, huh? So my parting thought for you here is just that shrinkage is a science experiment almost every single time. So what I recommend is that as you do a project, take some good notes. See how your fiber is reacting as you shrink it. Does it shrink a little? Does it shrink a lot? Make notes about the pattern and then compare it. I have kind of a running list of projects, and if I am on top of my game, I try to always do the math and figure out what the shrinkage is. So when I do that same pattern again, I at least have a more accurate idea of what to plan for. So those are my thoughts for you for this week. I hope that helps you in your next project, because there's nothing worse than planning a project and then it shrinks a ridiculous amount and it's not the size that you need. Let's try to avoid that, huh? Have a great week, my friends. Happy weaving.